Hey, this is Bradley Chubb, and you're listening to The Snap.
Hey, this is Cortland Sutton,
Hey, this is Tim Patrick.
and you're listening to The Snap
With Sidney Jones
on Broncos.
Podcast Network. Yeah.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back inside the UC Health Training Center for this week's episode of The Snap. As always, I'm your host, Sidney Jones, and it's week 7 of the regular season, and the Denver Broncos are back at Empower Field at Mile High this Sunday as they are set to host the New York Jets. So joining me on this week's episode of The Snap is New York Jets team reporter Caroline Hendershot. Caroline, so wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to come to Denver this Sunday, get some warm weather, a little different from New York. So I'm very excited for this week.
Excited to have you. How's the season been going for you so far? It's hard to believe it's already week 7.
I know. Isn't that crazy? I feel like it's the more time you spend thinking about what week it is, the further you get from what week it actually is, because I keep thinking, oh, it's only like week 4 or 5, and here we are at week 7. So It's flying by. It's been really fun so far. I think whenever you have as young of a team as the Jets are, it's always fun to kind of watch them grow and develop even through only 7 weeks. So I'd say I'm having a great time, but there's definitely more fun to be had.
For sure. You know, I know the Jets are heading into this matchup on a 3-game win streak. So, Caroline, what's the mood over there in the building, in the locker room?
It's funny because even though the Jets are a young team and you might expect them to get ahead of themselves as young teams do, and a lot of rookies, there's still so much veteran leadership. They got a lot of veterans. They retained them from last season, and then also through free agency. They got a lot of really staple veterans in the locker room and guys that remind the rookies to stay humble and to keep their eyes on just the next game. Corey Davis was talking to the media yesterday and was really emphasizing that. He said, yeah, sure, you might think that, but this locker room isn't like that. They're very humble. They just want to put their nose to the grindstone and keep working. So I think even though you know that there is a little bit of a winning excitement in the air, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell from the locker room itself. So that's I think, a very good thing.
It definitely is. You know, not only are the Jets on a 3-game win streak, but they're also 3-0 on the road, you know, as they're set to come on the road again to face the Broncos here in Denver. Caroline, what do you think, in what ways has this team really found their groove so far this season?
I think it's really phenomenal in the way in which they've traveled. And, you know, they always say defense travels, but I think especially the last couple games, defense has really traveled. I mean, Quinnen Williams was just named AFC Defensive Player of the Week this past week because of his incredible game last week with 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a blocked field goal. So he's been on another level this whole season, but especially as of late. And so I think that defense taking that next step has been really important. And especially on the road, they've made it a priority to continue being at full strength. Sauce Gardner, only one of 2 players since 2000 with a PD in each of his first 6 career games. So they're not letting up on any sides, whether it's the D-line or whether it's the secondary. They're really taking full advantage. And they've always said, the defense especially, a lot of leaders on that team said, they just want to execute and get 3 and out and then get the offense back on the field. So they've been doing a good job of that. And I think that's the key going into this week as well, just continuing that defensive trend and seeing what that can get them.
Yeah, speaking on the defense, Caroline, I mean, they've had such a dominant start to the season, like you mentioned, but looking at last week versus the Packers, I mean, held them to just 278 total yards, 10 points. What really impressed you about their performance last week?
I think someone who might have gone a little bit under the radar was Carl Lawson. He and Quinnen Williams have combined for 25 quarterback hits, and that's the most by any duo in the NFL. So I think really, even though he might have not gotten the glory sacks and all of those kinds of highlights, the pressure that he's bringing is really, really impactful. So I think them continuing to pressure the quarterback is, of course, always the number one priority. And so that D-line group has been really, really impactful.
Yeah. Quinnen Williams, you know, you've mentioned him a couple of times now. What do you think's kind of changed for him this season? I mean, he's had a couple solid first couple seasons with the Jets, but now on his 4th year, how has he really, you know, come to who he is now?
It's so funny because if you ask him what's working, why are you having so much success, he will even say, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. And I still have such a high expectation for myself. And it's funny because at the beginning of the season, Coach Saleh said he's never seen Quinnen Williams in the kind of shape that he's in. He was just a monster in training camp, and he's continued it, and you can really tell. But Quinnen was specifically saying the key for him to kind of continue the success is to be able to string those good games together. So he had a great game last week against the Packers, was really impactful, but he wants to be able to do that consistently. And so that, I think, is his next step. He isn't satisfied with where he is right now, and he still thinks there's so much room to grow, even though, I mean, his game last week, you couldn't have asked for anything better.
Right.
The blocked field goal, like the sacks, it was amazing. So I think when you're trying to get to that next elite level, you really have these high marks for yourself. And that's exactly what Quinnen's mindset is at right now.
Yeah, this Broncos offense is going to need to know where he's at on the field at all times, for sure, on Sunday. Another guy they need to, keep their eye out for, you mentioned earlier, cornerback Sauce Gardner. We saw him, take the cheese head, put it on his head at Lambeau Field last week. I love it. What threat does he really pose for, this Broncos offense, Caroline, that's still trying to work on some things?
He really is such a character. I mean, yeah. you would never believe that. You would never believe that he'd be taking the cheese hat from a fan and wearing it at Lambeau Field.
I loved it.
I know, me too. It was hilarious. But I think he's a threat no matter where he is on the field, and he's been able to be such a great lockdown corner. He has gotten matched up against some of the best in the league, and he has not backed down from any challenge. And I think it comes with his size, his athleticism, his speed, his length, like all of those attributes really make him just such an impactful player on the defense. And so I think that the biggest thing with him going into this game is he just has to focus on what he does best. It hasn't seemed like a problem for him yet this season. He just has consistently showed up week to week. So I think as long as he keeps playing his game, he's been doing really well. Again, I mentioned the PDs. He's only one of two players. That's like so crazy. So yeah, he's been really impactful for the Jets.
Well, looking at this offense, Caroline, the Jets, they haven't lost a game since Zach Wilson's return back in week 4. What have you really liked about his performance so far this season? And kind of what are your expectations for him on Sunday going up against this pretty dominant Denver defense?
I mean, pretty dominant Denver's defense is like not even.
They are playing phenomenal.
They are on another level. And I think the fact that Denver has allowed fewer than 20 points in 5 of 6 games in 2022 is just even crazier. So I think the biggest thing for Zach is, and something that he's done really well the last 2 games, is don't turn the ball over. He hasn't turned the ball over in the last 2 games, and he's been able to capitalize on that. I think it's always when you have a quarterback, as long as you make the least amount of mistakes you can, that will always turn out in your favor. And then he has people like Breece Hall on the offense that he can connect with. Corey Davis, who is just phenomenal, leading the NFL, averaging 18 and I think a half yards per catch. So he's doing a phenomenal job as well. So it's utilizing all those weapons. There's tons of people to connect with for Zach Wilson. And I think just staying calm in the pocket. Of course, a lot of pressure is going to be brought on that pocket with the Broncos defense. Right. But I think as long as he can understand that that's going to be there, it's going to be pressuring him, and staying calm throughout that, I think he'll be able to have some success.
You mentioned Breece Hall. It seems like the Jets have really finally found their identity on offense, just in the run game. A big reason for that is because of him. What's really impressed you about his start, to his rookie year so far?
I think, too, similar to Sauce, is he really doesn't back down from any challenge. And he has such a dual threat aspect to him. The fact that he can catch and then run and also just run, he's just full of different skill sets that make a running back so elite. And then the tandem of him and Michael Carter, putting both of them on the field at the same time, is just really, really helpful for an offensive scheme. So I think just watching him be able to kind of do it all and not back away from any challenge has been really impressive. He's also like a baby. He just turned 21 before the start of the season, and I can't believe it. I'm like, you are so young and you have so much room to grow. Like, the sky really feels like his limit. So I'm excited to watch even how much further he progresses. I know he just won Rookie of the Week, Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week. He won the AFC FedEx Ground Player of the Week. So he's just been on another level with awards this week specifically. So, well, I'm excited to see what he does on Sunday.
Well, last one about the matchup here for you, Caroline. I know the Jets are still looking to get their passing game going. So what's the coaching staff really been saying this week in terms of that this Broncos secondary maybe should be on the lookout for?
I think it's all about what the Broncos secondary kind of gives the Jets receiving core. So
right.
I think it'll be probably a mix of all things on the Jets offensive front. And it just depends where the gaps are for those Jets receivers, the running backs, all of the above, because I think they're definitely, like you said, still trying to get that passing game going. It hasn't been anything so instrumental. I know the fourth quarter Jets really like to turn it on, but I think if they can start off strong in the first quarter, because that's where we have the least amount of points by quarter. It's only 14 in the season so far. So I think if the Jets can start off strong in the first quarter, that's going to be the most impactful to get that passing game going, try and connect with some of those receivers, whether it's big plays down the field, short connects just to make the next drive. But the Broncos secondary brings a whole nother challenge in and of itself. And Garrett Wilson was even talking about that this week. So it's going to be a big matchup between receivers and the secondary.
Definitely. Well, Caroline, I appreciate your insight on this matchup. I want to switch gears for a little bit here. You know, as many of my listeners know on the Snap, one of my main goals is to highlight some of the most prominent and dominant women in the industry and their impact in the NFL. So I want to dive into your career for a little bit. For some of my listeners who might not know, what does your role with the Jets really entail?
So I am a team reporter and producer. So it's kind of, as I'm sure you know, it's a jack of all trades. You're always doing something. So we're either preparing for live shows, we're writing scripts, we're taping different segments. We do different segments weekly for a coach's show. Then we have Next Gen Staff. So it's a bunch of different things. Then I also have a podcast. And it's just like the list never ends, but it's really exciting. I think that we get so much one-on-one FaceTime with the players, because that's my favorite part of the job, is being able to connect with these players on a deeper level than just asking them questions in the locker room after a win or a loss, but really getting to know them and getting to know who they are as people, because they're all so kind and so gracious. It's amazing. And I feel really lucky that I get to do that every single day.
Caroline, I know you started with the team in the middle of the season last year, so you're coming up on a year here. What's been your favorite part of this role, and maybe the most challenging part too?
I think, like you said, it's kind of a double-edged sword, is the traveling. It is so fun to be able to go see different stadiums, go see different states. Like, I don't remember the last time I've been to Colorado. I think it was when I was probably in grade school for skiing in the winter. So I haven't been in really some time. So it's so exciting, because I also haven't been to all of the NFL stadiums. So getting to see each one and getting to have an experience on the field at each one, that's so fun. But again, the traveling, oh my gosh, it's very exhausting. I think
it's draining.
People forget that, because even driving like 30 minutes to the facility is exhausting.
Yes. I'm with you.
But the plane rides really get me, and I think it's fun, but it's also very tiring. But I mean, it's part of the job. It's only for half the year you get it like that, and then the other half it's a lot more calm and chill, and you have a more set schedule. So that's fun. But yeah, definitely the traveling. I'm really excited to come get some of your warm Denver weather this weekend, especially.
It's been so beautiful, and I'm right there with you on the traveling. It's so fun, but so exhausting. I am still trying to recover from our Monday night game in LA. Tough one, but well, Caroline, can you kind of walk me through the path that you took to get to where you are today?
Definitely. So I graduated Michigan in 2019, University of Michigan, and I applied to every on-air job under the sun. I cannot tell you how many I applied to. I literally lost count. But I applied to an ESPN production assistant job on a whim, because I'm from Connecticut. So I was like, oh, if I get this, that would be nice to be able to go back home and live with
Yeah.
mom and dad for a little bit, and ended up getting it. And then never in a million years did I think I would get it either, but it helped so much with production experience because I got to see truly how TV, and especially at the hub of ESPN, how TV is made from start to finish, what it looks like on air, all the work that goes in behind the scenes, how ideas are thought through of what goes on TV. So that was so instrumental in, I think, how I think even to this day. And then 2 years into that job, I had been knocking on every door trying to see if anything would open. And I just happened to come across a Jets reporter position online, applied, emailed the hiring manager, like sent my application in, and then ended up getting an interview. And the rest was history. I ended up getting hired a couple months later and in the middle of the season. So we're coming up on a year now here. And it's just been so amazing. It hasn't felt like a year. I swear I've been doing this for like 3 or 4 at this point. That's how time works in the NFL.
It really does.
It really flies, but it's been so great. And it's gone so fast. But yeah, before I knew it, here I was. I blinked and I'm a team reporter.
And lucky you, your first full season with the Jets, and they're pretty good this year.
I know. No complaints on my end. I'm feeling great about it.
Well, last one here for you, Caroline. I really like to end these episodes just inspiring the younger generation. So what's one piece of advice you'd give, someone looking to get into this industry, no matter what area of it they really want to work in?
Oh man, this is always such a good question. And I think it's crazy because I never thought I would do some of the jobs that I did leading up to getting this job. And I really do believe that everything serves a purpose. And so I always say how you do anything is how you do everything. So I used to have to print scripts for on-air talent at ESPN. And there's different blocks. So, you have your A block, then you go to commercial break, then you have your B block, go to commercial break. I would organize each script by block, make sure, double check all the pages were in order so that just in case anything happened, it wasn't on me and I did the job to the best of my ability. And it's so crazy because it was literally just printing paper, but I made sure that it was like organized and complete. And I laid it out in a way that like the talent could differentiate between each block. And so I always go back to that. And I remember when I first started doing it, I thought it was trivial and not important. And then I kind of flipped my attitude and I was like, hey, if there's going to be one thing you take away, it's going to be like you give your all into everything that you do. You make sure you're doing it to the best of your ability because you never know who's watching. You never know who appreciates it. You never know who picks up on those little details. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is even if you think something maybe doesn't matter as much as you think it should or it does, to just do it with as much effort and organization and attention to detail as you do everything with, because you never know how it will pay off. And now whenever I have a script printed for me, I'm always thanking that person like 10 times more. I'm like, thank you so much.
I love it. It's great advice. Great advice. Well, Caroline, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this week's episode. It was so fun getting to know you a little bit more.
Sydney, thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to see you on Sunday. I'm really excited. And hopefully there's a lot of sunshine out in Colorado.
Oh, yeah, there will be. I'll see you on Sunday.
Even better. See you then.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of The Snap. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. And thank you again to Caroline for being this week's guest. I hope you'll meet me right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for another episode that will take place in London next week. I'll see you all then.